there's a way that life is experienced as a divergent where there is this kind of like immediate embodied knowing of what's true. It doesn't come from looking out there as to what other people are thinking and saying and are telling us it's true. There is an inner sense of orientation that is, ah, this is what's true. Ah, it's different to what's going on out there. And there is this sense of this makes me like it urges me, it calls me, and of course it's a choice. This calls me to honor this sense of embodied truth, even when it's going to cost me. And so divergent souls act as this kind of corrective to the course that life is taking. They are the ones that are noticing that the way that we are living, and it starts with self, but of course it then expands out into our family, our community, and even humanity as a whole. In some instances, we notice when the form life is taking no longer fits what's being called for. And there is this internal pressure to respond, to diverge when something rings false. And so, again, just like the conformists, divergents have a role. Divergents are here to move, again, first and foremost, themselves, but ultimately humanity into new and truer directions. And this goes beyond this real kind of individualized sense of, this is what's right for me. This is all about me. There is something much deeper and more soulful and collective that's at the heart of this. Again, all of these things, as far as I know, based on everything else I've journeyed with, this is a soul choice. It's a destined choice. And we have free will within that. But this is ultimately something our soul has chosen in service of the whole. And it is, again, important to know that because sometimes these things are challenging. I'm just going to touch on there was a research study that if you read a post I wrote about this idea of divergence and conformism, I talked about this study. And it was actually this study that really sparked my current fascination about this. So I'm going to share briefly how this study was conducted and what it showed. But I'll make sure we've linked the original study somewhere in the description, so you can go off and have a look at and do your own research if you want, which I'd always recommend you do. And I think that's an important thing in itself for divergence, is to allow yourself to follow where you're being called, to go deeper, to do your own seeking. Of course, there is absolutely something so enriching to be able to have conversations of this kind together. But I'd also encourage you also to ask your own questions. I'm sure you are already doing that. So it was in the early 1950s, and there was a social psychologist called Solomon Asch. I don't know if it's pronounced Ash, like wood ash, but it's spelled ASCH. And this was actually something that took place over a series of studies, and they were showing the same thing. So I'm going to sort of talk about it almost like as a meta study. So in total, across all of these different studies, there were 123 male students that took part. And the study itself was really simple. I'm going to try and describe it. And again, perhaps we'll link to my original post where I showed an image of this. But if you can conjure this in your mind's eye, there were two cards that these students were shown. Really simple. So black and white, one card held just one single vertical line on it. The other card right next to it had three vertical lines of different lengths. But one of the lines on the card with three lines matched the one with one single line. Does that make sense? So one card with one line, one card with three lines, two of the lines, as in one on each card, matched. The other two lines on the 3-line card didn't. The task, albeit I may have made it sound very complicated, was really simple. It was not meant to be challenging. This is the crux of the whole thing. It was actually simple as anything to identify the matching lines. Like, it's probably something a 5-year-old could do. Even my dogs maybe could, or the more intelligent ones of them. And so the test was seemingly to say, can you match these lines? And each participant across these studies answered 18 times. And on 12 of those times, everyone else in the room gave the wrong answer aloud. And they did that first. So imagine I'm a real participant. Before me are going a whole bunch of actors who are pretending to be participants, and they are intentionally giving the wrong answer aloud before it gets to me. I don't know this. I think they're just the same as I am. And so when everyone up until me gives the wrong answer, 37% of the time, the real participants would also give the wrong answer. They would conform to the group. So it's, again, a really simple exercise. It isn't complicated. It isn't one of those ones where you're being like, oh gosh, perhaps I'll just listen to what everyone else is going to say though I can figure it out. You would know the answer, and then you've listened to a whole load of people give the wrong answer, and then over a third of the time, you're going to also give the wrong answer. Across the whole group, 3/4 of participants conformed at least once. So at least once across the 3/4 of these people, that's what they did. 3/4 of the let me say this is measuring two different things. So participants conformed 37% of the time, and across the whole group of participants, 3/4 of them conformed at least once. And afterwards, most of them said, even when they said the wrong answer, they knew it was wrong. And so they either said they went along with it to avoid standing out, to avoid looking divergent. And then there's a smaller number that kind of said, well, I started to actually doubt myself. I actually thought perhaps my eyes were deceiving me and I had got it wrong because everyone else was saying a different thing. So this tells you something really important. Again, although it's a really simple study, it was so simple in order to show this real stark difference between people. So it's showing that 3/4 of us have this sense, if the pressure is right, the pressure sort of like put upon us to conform is enough, we will knowingly do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, because it was almost like our highest value is to conform, to shape ourselves with others. And of course, 1/4 of those people never did. They never knowingly said the wrong answer. Even when all the other people were saying it's, I don't know, line A, they would always say it's line B if that's the truth that they could see. And then there's a final little twist in this I think is really interesting. And I think we see this play out in life. And I would say these are the people that are kind of maybe somewhere between divergence and conformist. They perhaps, and these could also be divergents that are maybe a little bit further back on their soul path, but they haven't quite yet actualized the sovereignty to do what they know is right. So this is an interesting kind of subsection. These people, when they heard one other person answering correctly. And again, bearing in mind in each group, there was only one true participant and the rest were actors. So you need to kind of extrapolate this to real life where the person saying the right answer is actually a real person. But within the study, let's say, when one other person, one of the other actors, answered correctly before the participant, wrong answer dropped between 5 and 10%. So just one person saying the truth changed how that real participant felt able to align with the truth themselves. So something really important to hear in that. There may only be 25% of humanity that are divergents, and they can exert an impact that goes far greater than that.